Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Links are in the description below. Please show some love of the author and me. On to the show. In order to know the authenticity and value of these potion formulae, William made use of a great amount of connections, and finally found a pharmaceutics master from the Pharmacist Guild. With the discernment of that pharmaceutics master, William's guess was confirmed. These potion formulae were indeed from the Dark Age, and differed from any known formulae from the Pharmacist Guild. William couldn't contain his excitement upon obtaining this knowledge. He felt like he had picked up a gem, which hadn't happened to him for a long time. However, what that pharmaceutics master said next dampened William's enthusiasm like a bucket of cold water. The formulae are probably authentic, but they involve a few concoction techniques that were lost in time. Even I can't make the potions successfully by following these formulae, the pharmaceutics master told him candidly. Upon hearing these words, William was immediately stunned. A formula that couldn't allow you to concoct a potion successfully was just a piece of waste paper. So what if it was from the Dark Age, when the corresponding concoction techniques were lost and even a pharmaceutics master couldn't concoct them? What was the use of holding on to them himself? William had somewhat given up at first. After all, this pharmaceutics master was publicly acknowledged as a very knowledgeable man. Even he couldn't concoct the potions, let alone the others from the Pharmacist Guild. However, not long after this incident, the news about a great number of high-level pharmacists appearing in the Tower of Dusk spread like wildfire in the breezy plains. Every faction immediately started to pursue these high-level pharmacists. How could this kind of widely known news escape the ears of William, who was in charge of the time consignment store? In fact, several competent subordinates had suggested that time consignment store should also join in this pursuit. William, however, was clearly more far-sighted than the other factions. He immediately felt something was amiss about this emerging Tower of Dusk. It wasn't as simple as it appeared to be. Without understanding the situation, it was unwise to offend the Tower of Dusk for the sake of a few pharmacists. Thus, William didn't hesitate to reject the suggestion by his subordinates. At the same time, he thought of the potion formulae from the Dark Age, which were lying in the attic. Although the price that he'd paid for the formulae was so insignificant compared to his net worth that it wouldn't hurt him to throw them away, he just couldn't accept it knowing that the formulae were authentic. It was as if seeing a gem buried in dust. William didn't have high hopes that those high-level pharmacists could help him concoct the potions. Although he didn't employ any high-level pharmacists personally, he didn't have to wait till now if he wanted to find high-level pharmacists to help him with the potions, given his abilities. Moreover, even that master from the Pharmacist Guild acknowledged that he couldn't concoct the potions from the formulae. He even claimed that there wasn't possibly anyone in the entire guild who could concoct the potions. If so, was there any high-level pharmacist even more knowledgeable than a pharmaceutics master? It was clearly impossible. When the other factions only saw those frenzy-inducing high-level pharmacists, what William noticed was the Tower of Dusk that was behind these high-level pharmacists. Why was there a sudden appearance of high-level pharmacists in the Tower of Dusk, a newly established faction? Though the Tower of Dusk was a guild of magic supported by the Supreme Council, the Supreme Council was, after all, not the Pharmacist Guild. Even the Pharmacist Guild wasn't able to get so many high-level pharmacists in such a short time, let alone the Supreme Council. In this world, not all mages belonged to the Guild of Magic. Similarly, not all pharmacists belonged to the Pharmacist Guild. Hence, William made a bold guess that this batch of high-level pharmacists might not be from the Pharmacist Guild, but rather from another less-known pharmacist organization. There was likely to be one or two pharmaceutics masters behind these high-level pharmacists. If not, it'd be impossible to nurture so many high-level pharmacists, since that pharmaceutics master had said that nobody in the entire Pharmacist Guild could possibly concoct the potions using those formulae. What about people outside the Pharmacist Guild? If he could think of a plan, maybe he could get the help of a certain pharmaceutics master through the Tower of Dusk to concoct the potions successfully from the formulae. This thought was too tempting for William to ignore. So, with this thought in mind, William arrived at the Tower of Dusk, hoping that he could revive the glory the formulae had during the Dark Age, with the hands of a pharmacist master behind those high-level pharmacists. What potion formula is there that nobody in the entire pharmacist guild can concoct? You must be exaggerating, Mr. William. Tell me about it. I'm interested to know what these formulae that nobody can concoct look like. Upon hearing William's full story, Wilkinson was more unconvinced. He wasn't someone that William was looking for, a pharmacist from an unknown pharmacist organization. He belonged to the Pharmacist Guild since the very start, and was a proud disciple of President Balba. How could he tolerate other people doubt his teacher's pharmaceutic abilities? William noticed Wilkinson's displeasure, but didn't know why he incurred it. He merely thought that Wilkinson didn't believe him, and said, "If you want to know, let me tell you about a formula here. The name of this formula is long lost, only the ingredients needed and a few concoction techniques remained. The herbs needed are, abyss blood crow tongue, heaven three-leaf grass, sword bamboo fruit, autumn bell flower, dark shadow flower stamen, icefield seaweed. A total of 47 herbs. Haha, this is ridiculous. How is this a formula? Even a pharmaceutics disciple knows that this formula can't possibly let you concoct any potions." Wilkinson felt so cheated right after hearing what ingredients were needed for that formula, and began to criticize it mercilessly. Normally, Wilkinson would only laugh it off if he got such a potion formula, and not be so fed up. However, William had aroused his interest and provoked him by doubting the abilities of the Pharmacist Guild. Yet Wilkinson ended up realizing that the so-called potion formula was a scam. How could he not be angry? First, there is an extremely foolish mistake that can be spotted at first glance. This formula needs 47 herbs? Looks like the person who faked it is brainless, and didn't have any pharmaceutics knowledge. To say that this thing is a potion formula and take it to us is a total disgrace. Wilkinson was angry over the fact that even the basic common knowledge was gotten wrong. Even if one wanted to cheat, couldn't he do it using more technicalities? Did he really think that everyone was a fool? Wilkinson doubted if William had even looked for other pharmacists, and wondered what kind of people he had sought out to look at the formulae. Even an old man who swept the floors of the Pharmacist Guild would never make such a mistake. "Mr. William, you are an appraiser, and a manager of a consignment shop. Maybe I cannot demand too much from you regarding pharmaceutical knowledge, but you should know at least some basic pharmaceutical knowledge as an appraiser. The characteristic of appraisers is being a jack of all trades, but master of none. If you don't even have such general knowledge, how can you be a jack of all trades?" Appraising was quite an awkward occupation. One needed to know a bit of everything, yet couldn't be an expert on anything due to constraints of time and effort. To be a jack of all trades, but master of none was the best description of appraisers. If this was said by any other person, William would have 1,000 methods for him to die miserably. However, since the one who spoke was a high-level pharmacist, he wasn't offended at all. "If you don't know, I can tell you that in this world, the most fundamental and important rule of pharmaceutics is the rule of balance. It is right to say that any potion formula is a reflection of the art of balance. To lose balance would result in losing everything. This is something that even pharmaceutics disciples know because it's the first piece of pharmaceutics knowledge they learn." Facing Wilkinson's consecutive rebuttal, whether he was right or wrong, William had no motivation to refute him, and could only agree with embarrassment. However, William's attitude couldn't cool Wilkinson's anger. For any pharmacist, pharmaceutics was a solemn affair, and the slightest negligence would lead to detrimental effects. Pharmaceutics in the Amril world wasn't just grinding a pile of herbs and throwing them into a pot to make a soup. It was about the interaction between different kinds of energy. A seemingly insignificant grass might contain sufficient energy to explode a house. Even the slightest mistake could seriously harm the pharmacist who made it. For example, if Lin Li hadn't destroyed that dangerous potion in time when he'd first visited the Pharmacist Guild, the entire guild would have exploded. Just talking about the rule of balance, your so-called potion formula is untenable. But let me tell you, there's a more fatal problem. Wilkinson had always detested such behavior that put other people's lives at stake. Of course, anyone who really attempted to concoct the potion according to this idiotic formula was a fool. Although Wilkinson didn't know who came up with William's potion formula, he rightfully scolded William since he was the one who had it. How stupid must you be to put the heaven three-leaf grass and dark shadow flower together? The heaven three-leaf grass contains the purest light energy, while the dark shadow flower is formed from the purest darkness energy. To put these two together is sure to cause death. With shaking hands, William took out his handkerchief and wiped his forehead, yet just after he did, he began to sweat again. Although he didn't know the two herbs heaven three-leafed grass and dark shadow flower, the conflicting characters of light and darkness were common knowledge for even people with no pharmaceutics background. Water and fire were conflicting energy forms commonly known by people. However, anyone with a slightly better understanding of magic would know that these two were not always conflicting, but rather initiated change and integration. In contrast, light and darkness were always conflicting forms of energy, with no chance of any integration or peaceful interaction. Wilkinson learned not only pharmaceutics knowledge from his teacher Lin Li, but also his way of teaching. One needed to know that Lin Li's pedagogical methods were scolding and punishment. Though he had never beaten Wilkinson before, scolding was also part and parcel of it during those days. Now he could be considered applying what he had learned. Since he was also angry at William in the first place, Wilkinson's words were incredibly savage. Nobody can concoct the potion? Indeed, nobody can. Do you think that a bunch of random herbs written together can be considered a formula? You are not a kid, how can you do such a thing? Do you really think that a random stone you picked up is a gem? Wilkinson's scolding was merciless. Though William laughed bitterly upon hearing the scolding, he didn't have any intention to defend himself. Meanwhile, as the only one who could stop Wilkinson, Lin Li didn't say a word after hearing that the formula required 47 herbs. Lin Li, who appeared to be calm on the outside, was actually very shocked. This formula that William was talking about was very similar to the one he had seen back in the Endless World, and was likely to be the same one. Back in the Endless World, Lin Li had once met a pharmaceutics guru who lived in seclusion during a mission. As the smurf account was specially for developing an avatar with every profession maxed out, he had purposely interacted with that pharmaceutics guru. He used many ways to fill up the relationship bar of the guru, and frequently got lots of goodies from him. After they became friends, when the relationship bar filled up, the pharmaceutics guru spoke of a potion called divine potion. However, he wasn't sure of the specifics of the formula, either, and only told him a few characteristics of this formula, such as the number of herbs needed. A true formula was not only listing of all the ingredients, but, more importantly, specified the amount of each ingredient used, the preparation method for each ingredient, the special techniques used during concoction, etc. The making of a potion was a very serious process, where a slight mistake could result in immeasurable outcome. The less serious would be wastage of precious ingredients, while the more serious threatened the life of the pharmacist. Therefore, only knowing the ingredients needed for a potion was of no value in regards to the concoction of that potion. If it was only a half-finished formula, that pharmaceutics guru didn't have to tell Lin Li about it only after the relationship bar had filled up. The truly important thing was that the last potion that a certain divine smith had concocted before he rose to become a divine smith was the divine potion. Though Lin Li's hunter account didn't have pharmaceutics as a sub-occupation, he still had quite some knowledge about pharmaceutics, at least more than William. Upon hearing the pharmaceutics guru's description of the formula, he had exactly the same thoughts as Wilkinson now, thinking that such a formula was impossible. Yet, Lin Li witnessed the true power of the divine potion not long after that conversation. It was a level B mission issued by the system. The goal was to escort an important personage from a certain kingdom, and they needed to travel through what was known as the untraversable land, the Rift Valley of Hell. Everyone who saw this mission thought that it was too difficult for a level B mission, since any mission that was related to the Rift Valley of Hell was generally a level S mission. Even Lin Li dared to go to the Rift Valley of Hell twice only after obtaining the Stars of Fury. Lin Li had obtained neither the Stars of Fury nor the 7 debris of the stars at that time, and could only be considered a high-level hunter with pretty good equipment. He had accepted this likely bugged one mission only for the sake of escaping the pursuit of other players who wanted to kill him. When the escort team had reached the Rift Valley of Hell, a large number of hell creatures swarmed out, and instantly surrounded the 1,000-man team. Out of those hell creatures, the most terrifying were the dozen-plus three-headed hell dogs guarding the gate of hell that even a legendary powerhouse wouldn't provoke easily. The team with close to 1,000 people couldn't even defend themselves for 15 minutes. Even Lin Li had prepared to give up. Just then, a court mage beside that important personage suddenly drank a tube of light golden potion. A golden light beam pierced through the night sky and landed on that court mage, and powerful aura emerged from the body of that court mage. Seeing it with his own eyes almost made Lin Li shout out a certain famous movie line. That court mage was still thin and feeble, but nobody thought he was weak. Instead, he seemed to be towering over everyone. Within seconds, the world was completely changed. The entire dimension seemed to be in the hands of that mage. Thousands of ferocious hell creatures, including the dozen of three-headed hell dogs no weaker than legendary powerhouses, all turned into ashes under such devastating power comparable to that of the gods. Lin Li then realized why this mission was only level B in difficulty. If they could survive the first round of attack by the hell creatures, they didn't have to worry about anything after that. After that incident, Lin Li racked his brains, and finally got the information from the court mage that the golden potion was actually the divine potion that the pharmaceutics guru had told him about. Back at the Scar of Death in the Blackstone Mountains, Lin Li had only been an archmage who relied on the all-knowing potion to reach the legendary realm. That court mage from the Endless World, however, relied on the divine potion to reach the sanctuary realm instead. It was indeed rightfully named divine. This was the terrifying ability of pharmacists, and also the reason why they had always towered over mages, no matter what status they had. Since then, Lin Li had always wanted to find the complete formula of the divine potion. Besides the fact that this heaven-defying potion could turn a human into a god, it could also help to prepare his smurf account for the rise into a divine smith. This was because Lin Li had a vague feeling that this divine potion was likely to be the key for a pharmaceutics guru to become a divine smith. Unfortunately, Lin Li hadn't been successful in his search even when his hunter account had gotten the Stars of Fury and the 7 pieces of debris of the stars, when he had smashed the eyeballs of the Dragon of Destruction, and when he had exhausted all means and put out all kinds of rewards to get the complete formula. After he had traveled to the Amril by using the Scroll of Wishes, this issue was naturally forgotten by him. Lin Li couldn't believe that the problem that had perplexed him all this while was so easily answered in this world. He had originally given up all hope of finding the formula for the divine potion, yet it appeared by itself now. Life was simply intriguing. How could Lin Li let this benefit that was delivered to the door escape, just like that? However, this enormous benefit didn't make Lin Li lose his composure. His face didn't reveal any desire. Though Lin Li didn't have any business skills, he knew that he had the upper hand since William had some favor to ask of Lin Li. However, once he had shown even a tinge of eagerness, William would have spotted that with his acute sense of judgment as an appraiser and reclaimed the upper hand. Since Lin Li wasn't close to William in the first place, it was wise to optimize his own interests. Wilkinson, don't be mad. I think William didn't do this on purpose. Why don't we hear what Mr. William has to say? Lin Li feared that Wilkinson would scold William too much, turning him away. This fellow was not only quick to learn pharmaceutical knowledge, but also scolding people. Now Wilkinson and his companions regarded Lin Li's words as the absolute truth. No matter what Lin Li said, they would follow it without any questions. It couldn't be helped. Though everyone had their own personality, after the countless experiences of being taught lessons for not obeying, it was now a reflex action to listen to Lin Li. Upon hearing Lin Li's words, Wilkinson reacted quickly. He shut up before he finished scolding William as if something got stuck in his throat. William glanced at the two of them. Astounded, he felt that he had underestimated this young president. What was his relationship with these high-level pharmacists? He even dared to speak to these pharmacists as if they were his subordinates. Mr. William, do you really have nothing to say? Lin Li prompted William while he stood there, stunned. William snapped back to his senses, and immediately replied, yes, President Felix, Mr. Pharmacist. Please allow me to explain it to you. Although William was scolded by Wilkinson, he felt much more at ease. He still believed that those potion formulae were authentic. After all, they'd been appraised by a pharmaceutics master, and he had personally verified the ingredients needed in the formulae. Humph. Wilkinson scoffed. If the formula had been given him by Lin Li, Wilkinson wouldn't have doubted it at all, but rather thought about what he didn't know. However, since this came from another person's mouth, he wouldn't believe it no matter what. William could only laugh bitterly at Wilkinson's attitude. After all, this formula was said not to be feasible according to a master from the Pharmacist Guild. Thus, it surely contained a conundrum that most pharmacists couldn't solve. He came to the Tower of Dusk precisely looking for a pharmaceutics master or an organization similar to the Pharmacist Guild. If a high-level pharmacist could successfully concoct the potion with the formula, then why would he even need to come this far? Mr. Pharmacist, you're right. In the field of pharmaceutics, how can my little knowledge compare to yours? However, I am still a little confident with my judgment skills. It's almost definite that the paper used to record this formula is a typical product from the Dark Age. William chose his words carefully before he spoke, fearing that he would enrage this pharmacist again should he say anything wrong. How's your business at the time consignment store, Mr. William? At this rate, it doesn't seem like it'll be good. A piece of paper from the Dark Age, no matter how rare it is just a piece of paper. But if there's a so-called lost potion formula written on it, its price would probably be hundreds or even thousands of times higher. Wilkinson couldn't help but speak to William with sarcasm. Actually, Wilkinson had a point. Making counterfeit artifacts was common everywhere. Even if people didn't like artifacts, there was always something they liked, so people would make counterfeits to obtain monetary gains. A piece of paper from the Dark Age, with a lost potion formula written on it was a pretty convincing trick. If a magic spell was written on the paper, it was easy for a mage to judge its authenticity by testing it out. It was not easy, however, to judge the authenticity of potion formulae, especially ones with precious herbs necessary, since it would take a long time to collect most of those herbs in the first place. Mr. Pharmacist, you seem to be thinking that someone had written a counterfeit potion formula on this piece of paper from the Dark Age. Indeed, I was concerned about this too, so I made use of many connections, and finally found a pharmaceutics master from the Pharmacist Guild. He helped me to analyze these formulae. Though I cannot reveal his name, this master confirmed that the formulae were authentic, just that there are many problems in the formulae that current pharmaceutics cannot solve yet. Since he finally had the chance to explain himself, William told them all he had wanted to say in one go. However, Wilkinson still didn't believe William, despite his explanation. If not for what Lin Li had said earlier, Wilkinson would have taught this old man a lesson already. Lin Li sat there quietly, tapping the table softly with his fingers. He was unbothered by all the commotion, and commented, "I also feel that Mr. William wouldn't come all the way here just to joke with us. However, if you, Mr. William, think that your formulae are real, what do you want us to do for you?" William didn't sense anything strange about Lin Li's comment, but Wilkinson felt a tug in his heart. William didn't know Lin Li's abilities, but Wilkinson had undergone training in the Tower of Dusk for such a long time that he was fully aware of Lin Li's capabilities in pharmaceutics. Though he was very respectful towards his teacher Balba, he couldn't help but acknowledge that Lin Li was superior to his teacher in every aspect of pharmaceutics. Now, judging from how he spoke, Lin Li seemed to be quite excited about that counterfeit potion formula. Or rather, maybe it wasn't even a counterfeit. Could William be right? Wilkinson and his companions all worshipped Lin Li's abilities to the point that they almost blindly believed in him. "President Felix, I came to visit because I hope that you can introduce me to a pharmaceutics master to see if he can get anything from these formulae." William didn't want to test the waters anymore, so he revealed his intentions in coming here. If not, he might not have any more chances to speak. "Pharmaceutics master? Whom did you hear it from?" Our tiny Tower of Dusk doesn't have any pharmaceutics masters. Lin Li wasn't wrong to say this. The Tower of Dusk really didn't have any pharmaceutics masters, it had a pharmaceutics guru. Since William had already lowered himself to seek help of a junior, that was Lin Li, he naturally wouldn't give up so easily. He continued, of course, I cannot ask you to help me for nothing. How about this, if this potion can be formulated successfully, both of us can collaborate in its sales. What do you think about this suggestion? The herbs listed by the formula are all extremely rare. Even if it can be made into a potion, it's very difficult to collect enough ingredients for even 1 or 2 tubes. How is it possible to produce it in bulk? Is there even any point in collaborating? Wilkinson attacked with no courtesy. The divine potion was a heaven-defying potion that allowed the user to borrow godly powers. The ingredients needed to make it were naturally super rare. Even with the abundant storage from the Pharmacist Guild, it was probably difficult to get half of the ingredients needed. It was impossible to produce this potion in bulk. William smiled and replied, Mr. Pharmacist, the formula that I have told you about is just one of the many that I have. I also have a few other high-level formulae which don't require such precious herbs. However, it's the same case as this one. That pharmaceutics master said it's impossible to make the right potions out of them. William had talked about the divine potion formula as a starter because he wanted to spark the interest of that pharmaceutics master behind the Tower of Dusk. By listing out those ingredients previously, he could indirectly prove that the formulae he had were of a high level. After all, for a person like a pharmaceutics master, typical potion formulae would hardly pique their interest, even if they had never seen them before. They pursued a higher level, and only those potion formulae they deemed useful for rising to that higher level would spark their interest enough to examine them. It's too early now to talk about collaboration. If you don't mind, Mr. William, how about telling us what formulae you have in detail? Our pharmacists can help you examine them. Lin Li wasn't interested in anything else William had. He urgently wanted to know whether that formula William had was really the divine potion formula. This, William felt a little conflicted. After all, potion formulae were unlike weapons or equipment. Those things still had to be bought from him even after the buyer had looked at them, yet potion formulae were something the buyer could easily remember after seeing them. Although it would still be with him after the buyer returned it, its value would be totally gone. Seeing that William was hesitant, Wilkinson was a little displeased, and said, You're lucky that Master Felix is interested in your formulae. If they are real, the only one in the entire Anril who can possibly make the potions from the formulae is Master Felix. It looks like you think that pharmacists like us are not worthy of your trust. Mr. William, do I need to arrange a room for you to think about this for a few days in peace? These words were a little harsh. What did it mean if they were unworthy of trust? William's heart jumped. If this got leaked, he would become an enemy of all pharmacists. It couldn't be helped, pharmacists were quite unreasonable. What could he do? Hey, we're sufficiently capable to be arrogant. Even Lin Li was momentarily stunned by Wilkinson's words. What Wilkinson had said seemed to be quite subtle, but in fact, anyone who wasn't a fool could sense that this was an undisguised threat. Other than those living legends at the sanctuary realm, only pharmacists who were capable of making the impossible possible could be so boldly unreasonable. With Wilkinson's status as a high-level pharmacist, even true legendary realm powerhouses would treat him as an equal. Wilkinson, they are Mr. William's formulae. Although we don't know the authenticity of the formulae yet, Mr. William is their owner, and has the freedom to decide whether he wants to let us see them. It's too much to say such things. Lin Li pitied William, so he lectured Wilkinson a bit. He then turned to William and said, Don't mind him, Mr. William. His personality is just like that, and he speaks whatever he wants. You see, we don't really have much time. Do you want to think about this back at home? William didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This President Felix appeared to be extremely reasonable, and was subtle in his speech, but was in fact more vicious of the two, and directly attempted to chase him out. Thinking about this carefully, William knew that it was meaningless whether he held back a trick or not. Those formulae were already deemed impossible to formulate by the pharmaceutics master from the Pharmacist Guild. Now, the only hope remained in the Tower of Dusk here. If the Tower of Dusk was also unable to concoct these potions, so what if he gave all these formulae to them? However, if the Tower of Dusk could really concoct these potions, he still had to rely on them and give them these formulae in the end. What else could he do but comply? Kidnap that pharmaceutics master? This meant that even if the Tower of Dusk had decided to pocket these formulae and hang him out to dry, William wouldn't lose anything from the deal. At most, he would have felt happy over them for nothing. To get them was luck, to lose them was fate. Thinking of this, William calmed down, and replied, "You're overthinking, President Fellick. I didn't say that I didn't trust you. I will pass you the formulae now." He stood up and passed Lin Li a wooden box carved with patterns. Lin Li grabbed the wooden box, but didn't open it immediately. Instead, he placed it on the table, and said, "Mr. William, although I said that the formula may or may not be genuine, and I don't know if the potion can be prepared according to the instructions of the formula, there is always a possibility. Since I don't have anything on now, let's assume that the formula is genuine, and talk about the cooperation that you mentioned. Do you have some ideas already?" Lin Li was a very straightforward person. If William had been his enemy, he would have immediately killed him and snatched the formulae away without feeling a sense of guilt. However, he decided to act appropriately since William was rather polite. In order to earn the respect of others, one would first have to respect others too. Lin Li would respect whoever respected him. Staring at the wooden box that he had just given Lin Li, William suddenly felt as if he had fallen into a trap. It seemed like President Fellick was very confident about these formulae. Otherwise, no one would be willing to take the time out of their busy schedule to discuss cooperation that was based on an assumption. Honestly, when William had first arrived, he had considered what kind of partnership he should have with the Tower of Dusk, as well as the ideal conditions he aimed for and the bottom line that he would maintain. However, it seemed that he could only push his bottom line further down. He had already handed over the formulae and the initiative for the business cooperation. It would be impossible for him to have a true share in the profits, and he could only hope to be offered a tiny amount of benefits. William sighed deep down, though he politely continued, "I wouldn't dare to call it a cooperation. The formulae would go to waste in my hands." "Humph, so you do have some self-awareness, after all," Wilkinson sneered coldly. Although Wilkinson had ruthlessly rejected William's claim regarding the authenticity of the formula, and even scolded him a lot, Wilkinson had a sudden change in attitude after Lin Li expressed a faint interest in the formula. After interacting with Lin Li for 3 months, Wilkinson and the other pharmacists learned that some rules were meant to be broken. However, Wilkinson did not feel ashamed about scolding William just now, because he felt that his words aligned with pharmaceutical theories, and whether or not it was right would depend on the abilities of the omnipotent Master Fellick. In the eyes of Wilkinson and the other pharmacists, Master Fellick was indeed omnipotent, for he was the only one who could concoct a potion using such a formula. "You don't have to feel sorry or embarrassed, Mr. William. Feel free to speak your mind. We're just making an assumption, aren't we?" Lin Li said magnanimously with a smile. Although most of the formulae in the wooden box did not appeal to Lin Li, he felt that it wouldn't be too difficult to formulate the potions with his incredible skills. The only difficulty that he might face would be concocting the divine potion that would make one possess godly abilities. However, it was not necessary to tell that to William. After all, they had only met twice so far. "Well, all right then, I will just say it." William paused for a moment. After seeing that Lin Li was not just patronizing him, he continued, "If the master you know can really formulate the potions, I hope to get the franchise for these potions." William's request was indeed not overboard. After all, Lin Li wouldn't be able to produce the potions without the formulae that William had provided. Likewise, his formulae would be useless if Lin Li refused to help him formulate the potions. Hence, they both needed each other to establish a fair partnership which offered mutual benefits. However, William had already surrendered his dominant position, and it would be too unrealistic to think that he could share the profits with the pharmacists. Hence, he chose to forego the rights to the formulae, and put himself in a position where he was purely a businessman. In fact, William had put in some thought and effort into this. He owned the time consignment store, and apart from the powerful divine potions, the rest of the potions that he sold weren't advanced. In other words, those potions were eligible for auction. Given how popular and in demand the long-lost potions from the Dark Age were, it should not be a problem to sell them at sky-high prices. When faced with a huge temptation, not many people would be able to see the harsh reality and hold back. Even Wilkinson gave a nod of approval with a look of satisfaction on his face after hearing William's request, though he could not hide his intentions from Lin Li. From Wilkinson's point of view, the potions had to be sold even though they could also use the potions themselves. They would be up for sale regardless of whom they hand the potions to. After all, the formulae were William's, and although Wilkinson was unreasonable, he was well aware of that. Therefore, after hearing William's request, he felt that the old man was quite sensible to give up on the ownership of the formulae. Lin Li obviously wouldn't be duped so easily. What William wanted was sole franchise and distributor rights to the potions, which was enough to maximize the profits from the potions. Although the other benefits seemed insignificant compared to obtaining the divine potion, profits were still profits. Besides, Lin Li didn't want others to think that he was a pushover who could be duped easily. Lin Li smiled faintly and looked at William with a playful look. "Mr. William, in that case, what is the price that you're willing to pay when you take the potions from us? Is it going to be proportional to your sales revenue or our cost price?" Monopoly meant that they would reap huge profits, not to mention the auction sales method. Although there was a possibility of the potions not getting auctioned off, it would not be considered a loss. Besides, there'd always be a demand for magical potions in this world. That would have to be tabulated according to our sales revenue, William said upon realizing that the young mage was indeed not easy to fool. "Haha, just kidding. Everything is simply an assumption for now. As for the details of the future cooperation, we'll let Archmage Gavin of the Guild of Magic discuss them with you carefully." Lin Li was pleased with William's willingness to compromise, and he believed that Gavin would definitely be able to come up with a profit ratio that would be beneficial to the Tower of Dusk. No one would say no to more money, not even Lin Li, who had a stable means of earning plenty of money that was continuously invested in the Tower of Dusk. However, the Tower of Dusk was not using up more money than Lin Li could make. The more investors there were, the quicker their abilities would increase. As the master of the Tower of Dusk, he would obviously place the interests of the Tower of Dusk first, especially since he was not close to William at all. They had only met each other twice. Although William was forced to make a compromise in the end, and did not manage to confirm the details of the cooperation, it was at least not a wasted trip for him. William could tell what Lin Li implied, and he knew that he was about to end the conversation. "Hence," he said, "President Fellick, there will be an auction at the time consignment store next month. I would like to take the liberty of extending an invitation to you. Would you allow me the honor of having you participate in this auction?" Auction. Auctions were not something new to Lin Li. The Gerosis Guild of Magic suddenly popped up in his mind. When he'd auctioned his potions, the forces and leaders from Gerosis all rushed to call their bids like madmen because the prices of the potions were not too high. Auctions were events where something could be sold at 10 times their original value. One would be allowed to rip someone off openly during auctions. This auction is held once a month. I'm not boasting, but we do have some influence in the breezy plains. Therefore, it often attracts sellers who have rare items that they want to sell for a good price. All those castellans, captains, and leaders love attending my auctions to purchase some items of their desires. Although William had just been criticized for his pharmacological knowledge, he still sounded prideful. In order for auctions to become influential, they would have to sell top-grade items, which naturally had to be discovered and authenticated by the appraisers. Although William had been criticized by Wilkinson for his lack of knowledge, he was confident that it was not superficial. Just like pharmacists would be delighted to get a potion formula and magicians would be excited to get a new magic spell, an appraiser would be glad to find new knowledge. Hence, William decided to befriend Lin Li after hearing his description of the adamantine of bad luck during their meeting at the banquet in the main city of Roland. At that time, William had also believed that Lin Li would be pleased to befriend him once he found out about his identity and reputation in the breezy plains. However, he'd never expected that he would go back and end up receiving no news, despite having waited for a long time. He'd only found out during his visit to the Tower of Dusk that the young chap was actually the reputable and renowned genius young mage and president of the Guild of Magic in the breezy plains. William sighed and thought to himself, no wonder he didn't take me seriously. He has the support of an esteemed pharmacist guild, while I'm just an inferior appraiser. What am I to him? This time, William didn't want to miss the opportunity again. Although there was a possibility of cooperating, that was completely different from friendship. In order to convince Lin Li to attend the auction, he again began to talk about the items that would appear during the upcoming auction, such as some rare magical materials, equipment, and medicinal materials. Last but not least, please allow me to keep you in some suspense. The finale of this auction will be a mystery object from the Elf's Kingdom, William said vaguely. Lin Li knew that the time consignment store auction was actually very famous in the breezy plains, so much so that even outsiders would specially rush to the breezy plains for the auction. Lin Li would often hear his mages talking about it too. However, since he left Roland City back then, he proceeded to battle in the Dragon Mountains and the Scar of Death. He then spent 3 months in the Abyss of Tharlan. Hence, he did not have the time to pay attention to the auction. Although he was still very busy now that the operations of the Tower of Dusk and the pharmaceutical business were in full swing, it was not impossible for him to find some time. Moreover, Lin Li still remembered the pair of daggers which had been used by the legendary assassin that he had acquired for Norfeller from the time consignment store previously. According to Ujfalusi, those daggers were produced by the immortal king. Clearly, there were still superior items that could be purchased at the time consignment store, and he reckoned that it wouldn't be a waste of his time. Just as Wilkinson was about to speak and make things clear to William as a pharmacist, he was stopped by Lin Li, who smilingly said to William, "Since you've invited me personally, how can I turn you down, Mr. William? Besides, I'm also looking forward to that mystery item from the Elven Kingdom that you have mentioned." "All right, I will await your arrival," William said, standing up to leave after seeing that everything had been settled. "Mr. William, please wait a minute," said Lin Li, who did not plan to end the conversation just like that. Instead, he extended his hand to gesture for William to take a seat again. "Since you've invited me to an auction, I can't turn you down or let you leave without giving you something in return. I do have some things here. Please arrange for them to be put up during the auction." He then whipped out a few bottles of potions and placed them on the table. "These are?" William asked apprehensively. "These are the potions that Wilkinson and the other pharmacists have concocted during their practice. However, you can rest assured about the results and effects of the potion. These 2 silvery white potions are sacred potions, these 5 are mystical potions, while this one is the power of Achilles." Staring at the 20-odd potions in front of him and listening to Lin Li's introduction, even William, who had gotten used to seeing rare items, could not help but feel astonished. Although the colorful potions served different purposes, they were rather similar in the sense that all of them were highly coveted by archmages and sword sages, who would be willing to do whatever it took to obtain them. Yet, President Fellick claimed that they were just the practice pieces of the pharmacists even though they were powerful enough to drive anyone crazy. William could not help but feel a little jealous when he saw Lin Li whipping out the potions nonchalantly as if they were just bottles of water. The displeasure caused by being forced to hand over the formula of the potions and make concessions on the issue of cooperation vanished from William's heart at that instant. Staring at the potions on the table, he thought to himself, this must be the advantage of having the support of pharmacists. The potions that are highly coveted yet hard to acquire by many are actually the byproduct of the training sessions of the pharmacists. William made his mind up, and was determined to build a close relationship with the young mage. William was an appraiser and a businessman. He was also old in his years and way past the age where he would act rashly. To him, going toe-to-toe with each other for power and interests were things that were meant for youths. Although they could win their dignity and gain pride, they wouldn't be able to acquire other benefits, and might even bring about damage to their family. It absolutely was a silly behavior. There's no harm in making compromises as long as I can still reap some benefits at the end, William thought to himself. He was sure that he would be able to gain massive profit as long as the potions were put up for sale during the auction. Even if he could only enjoy the revenue from auction fees, he would gain a huge boost in his reputation, which would make up for the monetary loss that he might incur. Don't worry, young Master Felix. These potions will definitely be sold at a price that does their value justice, William said solemnly. Mr. William, I hope that our cooperation will be successful, Lin Li said smilingly while standing up to see him off. For the next several days, the representatives who were waiting in the hall of the Tower of Dusk continuously discussed the purpose of William's visit. Some of them suggested that William was probably there to recruit the pharmacists too. After all, he was reputable in the breezy plains. The conjecture and speculation made them feel like they were pressed for time, because none of them was confident in trumping William. It had been a few days since William visited, and the auction that he'd mentioned was just round the corner. Lin Li decided to use this chance to unwind and relax, and see if he could get his hands on some superior grade items at the same time. When he'd held a pharmaceutical competition previously, Lin Li promised to take the winners to the auction. Unsurprisingly, Wilkinson earned himself a spot. Several senior pharmacists, including Wilkinson, as well as two undead creatures, Lichudge Falusi and the vampire Norfeller, headed together with him to Roland City. It had been almost a year since he went to Roland City. This time, he actually didn't have much to feel emotional about. In Lin Li's opinion, this world was progressing and evolving too slowly, unlike the city that he'd lived in before he arrived in Amrel. Roland City was one of the most developed ones in the Breezy Plains, and was even known as the Granary of the Breezy Plains. Lin Li recalled the time when he'd come here and exerted plenty of effort to obtain 1,000,000 gold coins worth of food. He managed to rescue the daughter and son of the Castellan of Roland City, took Lichudge Falusi under his wing, and even met the pious and religious female paladin. He hoped that he wouldn't meet another loony again. Hello, you must be President Felix from the Tower of Dusk. Our boss, William, has instructed me to come here to welcome you, a person said politely after showing up abruptly in front of Lin Li. Oh, it's you, Mr. Brooke. Thank you for waiting for me, Lin Li said while staring at Brooke, who was also the person who had sold him the pair of daggers at the time consignment store. Brooke hurriedly said, You're being too polite, President Felix. Our boss has already arranged for accommodation and lodging for you and your companions. Please come with me. Due to the fact that William had no idea which day Lin Li would arrive in Roland City, he decided to let Brooke, who knew Lin Li, stay at the entrance of the city to receive him lest he gave Lin Li a poor impression. After Lin Li entered the city, Brooke, who had been waiting for a long time, immediately recognized him as the young mage who had bought the pair of daggers from him using the crystal card from the Glitter Gold Trade Union and the master of the Tower of Dusk. That made Brooke feel thankful for the fact that he had not offended the young president of the Guild of Magic. Although Brooke was not a big shot, he liked paying attention to the affairs of various forces, hence, he was very familiar with the fact that many factions had gathered together at the Tower of Dusk. He initially just wanted to gloat and watch the senior pharmacists of the Tower of Dusk being poached. However, after finding out that Lin Li, who was a holder of the VIP crystal card issued by the Glitter Gold Trade Union, was the master of the Tower of Dusk, Brooke knew that he wouldn't get to gloat anymore. The Tower of Dusk was a newly established guild of magic, and even though they had the Malfa family's support, they couldn't overpower all of the other forces in the Breezy Plains. However, who knew that he'd be a VIP member of the Glitter Gold Trade Union? It was no wonder that his boss kept reminding him not to be impolite. The thought of it made Brooke treat Lin Li with more respect. Brooke had initially already prepared a luxurious carriage that was parked by the side, and was just waiting for Lin Li to arrive so that he could usher him to the resting area. However, the young mages in Lin Li's team insisted that they head there by foot so that they could take a look at the scenery in Roland City. Wilkinson and the other senior pharmacists were the center of attention of the many factions. They were just like superstars in the breezy plains. Hence, Lin Li decided to make them dress like mages. Despite feeling displeased, Brooke had no choice but to agree to giving up on the carriage, since the mages were part of President Felix's entourage. Hence, he instructed the people who were manning the carriage to follow them closely while he proceeded to walk in the direction that he had planned to. Roland City was bustling and lively as usual. However, it did not faze or entice Lin Li, who felt that it was insignificant because he had experienced much livelier crowds than this. Unlike Lin Li, Wilkinson and the rest looked around fervently, like curious country bumpkins who were visiting the city for the first time. Lin Li felt extremely embarrassed because of them. If you're enjoying my content, please consider donating a coffee. Or checking out my shirts on TeePublic. Actually, Roland City was not that much more developed than Alana. In fact, it was actually inferior in various aspects. However, the unique Dark Age architectural design of Roland City was what piqued the interest of Wilkinson and the rest. Such architectural style was present in Doolin City too. However, Wilkinson and his peers were too obsessed with the pharmaceutical knowledge that was imparted to them by Lin Li, so much that they practically did not leave their accommodations at all. Without a thirst for knowledge like theirs, even the most talented individuals would not be able to attain the achievements that they had. Wilkinson and the rest scanned their surroundings in curiosity. Meanwhile, the two undead creatures remained composed, seemingly treating everything around them like it was transparent. Lin Li looked extremely bored, causing Brooke, who was in charge of reception, to feel a little worried. Lin Li's purchasing the daggers using the Glitter Gold Trade Union's VIP crystal card was still fresh in Brooke's memory, and he clearly remembered that Lazarick, the son of Doolin City's Castellan, had some feud with President Felix. Lazarick and his friend, Argus, would definitely be present during the auction, and if they were to run into Lin Li, Brooke would be put on the spot because he could not afford to offend any one of them. It would be unlucky if he got into trouble. Ironically, one would be bound to end up offending both parties whenever they tried to avoid offending either of them. When one tried to please both parties, it would usually backfire, and they would end up failing to do so. Brooke was just an insignificant figure who knew that he would definitely be chased out if anything severe were to happen. Hence, it would be impossible for him to maintain a neutral position. He stole a glance at the board President Felix, and began to form ideas of his own. Although he was not going to take sides, he just wanted to take precautions in case something really happened. He would at least have someone to defend him. President Felix was a Glitter Gold Trade Union VIP crystal card holder and the president of a guild of magic who had recently gained the support of the pharmacists. Even William regarded him highly, and visited him personally at the Tower of Dusk. Since William respected him so greatly, Brooke reckoned that President Felix's words were definitely significant and impactful. Anyway, the stubborn Lazarick was just being tyrannical and haughty because he had a Castellan for a father. In fact, he was incompetent, and even William could not be bothered to meet him. How could his father compare to the Glitter Gold Trade Union? President Felix, you don't seem to be too interested in the scenery here. Why don't I introduce you to the upcoming auction? Brooke asked, trying to suck up to him. Feeling extremely bored, Lin Li nodded, and said, "Oh, I'll have to trouble you to introduce it to me, Mr. Brooke." "It's my pleasure to do so, President Felix." Brooke deliberately stopped in his tracks to bow to him respectfully. He then continued to show Lin Li the way while introducing the auction to him. Since the scale of the auction was larger than before, they decided to hold it in the Elven Theater in Roland City. Just like its name suggested, the Elven Theater was a building from the Dark Age, and also one of Elven-style buildings preserved the best after the war. The Elven Theater was very famous in the Breezy Plains, as well as the entire Felon Kingdom. It could be considered a landmark of Roland. In the Elven Theater, there were 2,000 ordinary seats and 150 VIP rooms. Clearly, the auction was going to be held on a large scale. Some might think that 2,000 guests were not a big deal, and it could not mean that the auction was definitely conducted on a large scale. However, they had to remember that it was an auction, not a concert. Besides, it was an auction held by the time consignment store, where only the prestigious and strong deserved to be given a seat. Those who were leaders of 500-member strong forces might not even be worthy of a standing ticket. Indeed, the strong forces in the breezy plains would not be enough to fill up all 2,000 seats, and there were only a few forces in Felon Kingdom which could meet the standards. There were also forces from Leaden Kingdom, which bordered the region on the other side. Although William modestly mentioned that the auction held by the time consignment store had a little bit of influence, it actually had great influence over various countries. Of course, not all forces would come to participate in the auction every month. The time consignment store would always prepare a catalog of items that would be up for sale during the next auction 1 month in advance, and distribute them to the VIP customers. That way, they wouldn't have to come all the way for the auction if there wasn't anything that they were interested in. By right, the potions that Lin Li had handed over to William should only be put up for auction next month because they had missed the catalog registration window. However, the auction this time was larger in scale compared to the previous years, hence, all of the VIP guests would be present. There was thus no need for the potions to be registered in the catalog. After hearing William's words, Lin Li began to admire him for being able to manage the auction of the time consignment store so excellently. It was a feat that could not be done simply with good eyesight and taste. The idea of a pre-issued catalog was undoubtedly a smart move, which was enough to win him a group of loyal customers. Actually, a catalog was not quite mandatory in order to allow the guests to find out the items that would be put up for auction in the following month, because the forces could totally hire people to keep close tabs on the monthly auctions and feed them with information beforehand. It was something that most medium forces did. However, the catalog was no longer meant to be just a notice, and instead had gradually become a status symbol, just like the Glitter Gold Trade Union VIP Crystal card and the membership cards of various industries that Lin Li had owned before he traveled to Amril. Regardless of whether those who received catalogs were interested in the items on the catalog or not, receiving a catalog monthly meant that they were valued by the time consignment store. It meant that the time consignment store was certain that they had the ability to purchase the items that were to be auctioned off. It was a form of respect that was enjoyable for them. Unlike others, they didn't need to send their people to keep close tabs on the auction every month. That gave them a sense of superiority. Without a doubt, there was only a small amount of people who would receive catalogs each month. There were 2,000 ordinary seats and 150 VIP rooms in the Elven Grand Theatre. Those who received catalogs every month would be eligible to sit in the VIP rooms. However, there would be less than 100 VIP guests in the upcoming auction. President Felix, boss has already added your name to the VIP list personally when he returned. From now on, a catalog will be sent to the Tower of Dusk every month, Brooke said earnestly and respectfully. Oh, please thank Mr. William on my behalf, Lin Li said courteously. Although the catalog was not a necessity that he couldn't do without, he acknowledged it as a token of goodwill from William. Finally, the group arrived at the abode that William had arranged for them. It was a castle. The castle was not meant for all the guests, and was only allocated to Lin Li and his entourage. Although it was only a small castle, it did not seem cheap, and was in fact very posh and luxurious. This is the castle used by us to host the royal family. The boss knew that President Felix may arrive with numerous companions, and that it wouldn't be convenient to arrange for you guys to live in ordinary hotels. Hence, he borrowed this place from Lazaric. We hope that you will have a pleasant stay for the next few days. As a subordinate, it was necessary for Brooke to relay William's intentions. Lin Li shook his head slightly, thinking to himself, this old man William has even borrowed a castle. How can I have the cheek to shortchange him again during the cooperation? Although both magicians and pharmacists had a higher social status than nobles, their living standards were far worse than those of the nobles. The purpose of the castle that was used for accommodating the royal family members was to give the occupants as pleasant of an experience as possible. Lin Li and the rest seemed to have become country bumpkins all of a sudden. After arranging for Lin Li and the rest to settle into the castle and fulfilling his boss's instructions, Brooke bade them goodbye and left. The auction was to be held the next day. After Lin Li and others explored the castle thoroughly, Wilkinson began to get extremely jittery and fidgety. Although he had already seen most of the scenery of the streets of Roland City, he still found it interesting. Lin Li sipped on some royal tea, while the two undead creatures stood by his side, exuding a cold and daunting aura. Wilkinson and the other pharmacists seemed to be gossiping about something while standing together. At last, Wilkinson smiled and walked towards Lin Li. "Wilkinson, try this tea. The aristocrats really know how to enjoy life," Lin Li said while raising his cup. "Nah, it's all right," Wilkinson frantically said while waving his hand. "Okay." Lin Li took a few more sips, and looked up to see that Wilkinson was standing in front of him. Staring at him peculiarly, Lin Li asked, "Is there an issue?" Although Wilkinson was 2 years older than Lin Li, after several months of training, he and the other pharmacists had begun respecting and admiring Lin Li, especially after all the scoldings and lectures. Wilkinson hesitated for a moment and stole a glance at his friends, all of whom seemed to be gloating over his misfortune. One of them even mouthed the words, "Let me do it if you don't dare to." Gritting his teeth, Wilkinson said, "Master Felix, here's what happened. Teacher once mentioned to me a herb store called 7-Leaf Grass before we headed to the breezy plains, and instructed me to help him find some medicinal herbs. Look, do you think I can?" "7-Leaf Grass?" asked Lin Li as he placed his teacup down, interested. Wilkinson nodded profusely, and said, "Yes. Teacher told me that there is a wide variety of herbs available at this store, and they're always in stock. This store has lots of rare herbs that can't be found elsewhere." "Alright then. Since I don't have anything else to do, I'll go check it out together with you. I shall see what's so special about the store that Master Balba has recommended." Lin Li did not probe any further, and instead resolutely stood up to get ready to leave. Actually, he was well aware of Wilkinson's intentions. If Balba really needed some herbs, he would have a million ways to obtain them. He wouldn't have to resort to getting his student to search for them on his behalf. However, Lin Li had only agreed to go explore with him out of boredom. There was nothing much to see in the castle, and there was nowhere for him to practice magic, nor was there a pharmaceutical lab. He couldn't possibly spend the entire afternoon having tea. "Let's go." "What's wrong with them?" Lin Li asked upon sight of a few other pharmacists, who were hanging their heads low dejectedly and doing nothing. They're just tired and don't wish to go out. We'll just let them stay behind to get some rest," Wilkinson said smugly while staring at his several friends. "Well, they have to pay the price for losing." "Let's go, then," Lin Li said smilingly. Wilkinson smiled wryly and followed Lin Li. After thanking the butler of the castle and turning down his offer to provide them with a carriage, Lin Li and Wilkinson left the castle, and headed to the address given by the butler on foot together with the two undead creatures. Along the way, Wilkinson told Lin Li the legendary stories about 7-Leaf Grass. In the myths of Amril, there was once a bunch of 7-leaf grass that grew on the Tree of Eternity. It had the ability to resurrect a dead person due to the fact that it had been grown with the essence of eternity. It was said that the Queen of the High Elves had once got injured by a magical beast named Sphinx that had a goat's head and a lion's body. The claws of the Sphinx carried a poison that was more intense and lethal than the poison of vipers. It was said that even the gods couldn't resolve this poison. However, just as the Queen of the High Elves was about to choose her successor, a powerful figure that was like the incarnation of a god picked some 7-leaf grass from the tree, which he then used to formulate a detoxifying potion for the queen. The poison was finally removed. Powerful like the incarnation of a god, upon hearing the description, Lin Li immediately thought of two individuals, the immortal king and Juresco. The first person who gave the queen an antidote could very likely be the immortal king, he reckoned. Apart from the fact that the chronological order was accurate, the immortal king was also an all-round individual who could use the remains of the Dragon of Destruction to build the sky castles for the High Elves. Hence, it was not surprising that he could formulate a potion like that. The seven-leaf grass was located at the side of a small plaza in the southern corner of Roland City. The three-storied building with a white dome had seemingly gone through more vicissitudes than the buildings surrounding it. There were no words written on the signboard of the store, and there was only a picture of the legendary seven-leaf grass. It seemed to show the confidence of the store owner. The entrance of the store was rather small. After all, pharmacists were much rarer than mages and warriors. Besides, pharmacists were the target consumers of herbal stores, hence, there would obviously be very few customers. When they entered the medicinal store, they didn't smell the kind of mixed herbal scent that would usually be found in a common medicinal store. That just meant that the staff of the store had conducted appropriate management of the herbs. The scent indicated the diffusion of energy, and the mixed medicinal fragrance indicated that there was a problem with the preservation of multiple medicinal materials. When high-level potions were formulated, a minor change would lead to failure. Standing in the lobby of the medicinal store, they could see a neat medicine cabinet that was made of neatly arranged crystals. The transparency of the cabinet allowed others to see what was inside, but sunlight could not penetrate it, and thus wouldn't destroy the medicinal herbs inside. The design could be regarded as meticulous, for the visitors could carefully pick the herbs that they wanted without wasting any. However, there was a hefty price to pay for such a meticulous design. Hence, no one dared to use crystals for storing herbs. Lin Li formed a good impression of the seven-leaf grass medicinal store. The only issue was that the middle-aged man who was manning the shop did not once stand up or even speak up to welcome them. He felt that the middle-aged person had to be the manager because he could tell from the decor and layout of the store that the owner should be one who cared about the feelings of the shop's customers. In that case, how could it be the same person who had remained still even after seeing the customers enter? They were in Seven-Leaf Grass Medicinal Store, which was well known throughout the entire Breezy Plains. Although it was always compared to the Time Consignment Store, Seven-Leaf Grass did seem rather noble and prestigious because its main clientele comprised mostly lofty aristocrats. The manager felt that the Seven-Leaf Grass was prestigious for serving only esteemed pharmacists, while the Time Consignment Store was cheap in his opinion because it peddled potions or magic weapons and equipment, and served warriors and mages. As the manager looked up at the four people who had just come in, his heart turned numb. Who would be willing to give you a free meal? Although the four of them were all wearing magic robes, mages weren't significant here, let alone the ones who were dressed shabbily. Wilkinson and the other pharmacists were now the stars of the Breezy Plains, whom all the forces knew about. Hence, they had deliberately disguised themselves as mages on this trip out with Lin Li. Lin Li only cared about his own well-being, and was not bothered about what others thought of him. Before he came to Amril, he'd been just a homebody who didn't care about his appearance at all. It was much worse for Ujfalusi and Norfeller. Due to the fact that they were undead creatures, their strong undead aura could not be hidden at all. Hence, they seemed distasteful regardless of how well they were dressed. After confirming their identities with a glance, the manager who despised the Time Consignment Store felt nothing but disdain for them. He was planning to let them take a look and scram, and could not be bothered to waste his time talking to them at all. The manager humphed coldly in displeasure and lowered his eyelids as if he were going to sleep. Wilkinson wasn't an oblivious and unscrupulous nerd. He could obviously tell that the manager was looking down on them with contempt. After joining the Pharmacist Guild, he was accepted as a student by teacher Balba, all thanks to his hard work and talent. Who would dare to despise Balba's student in such a disrespectful manner? He had gotten to where he was today based on his own talent, hard work, and stellar performance. Those who were jealous of him did not have anything to say at all. Although calmness was the basic requirement for a pharmacist when preparing a potion, Wilkinson was still in his 20s, after all. Being young and vigorous, how could he tolerate letting others look down on him? However, when he was about to react, he discovered that Master Felix was looking at the medicinal herbs nonchalantly, while the two undead creatures remained calm and unfazed. The undead obviously wouldn't have any emotional fluctuations, for they had already lost their lives, and were nothing but empty shells. Hence, why would they care about the opinions of others? To Ujfalusi and Norfeller, their only concern was the safety of their master. Unless someone threatened Lin Li's safety, nothing had anything to do with them. Lin Li was not bothered by the manager's lack of enthusiasm. He was just there to buy medicinal herbs anyway, not to perform a stand-up comedy. He didn't have the time to teach the manager a lesson, either. He walked along the rows of crystal medicine cabinets in the hall, after which he realized that he was in need of several kinds of medicinal materials. Lin Li took the time to study and analyze the formulae that William had given him. The divine potion was difficult to formulate, and even though he was a pharmaceutics guru, he still wasn't that confident. Besides, the required medicinal materials were not that easy to gather. Staring at the different medicinal materials that were to be used for other formulae, Lin Li felt that the formulae were not mixed randomly. It seemed that formulating the other formulae, one would very possibly be enlightened, and then have more confidence in preparing the divine potion. Although the crystal medicine cabinets were arranged like supermarket shelves, the medicinal materials in them were not easy to obtain. Lin Li wrote down some of the medicinal materials required by the formula on paper, after which he walked towards the middle-aged person, and said, "Please help me get these medicinal materials." He then slid the piece of paper towards him. Pursing his lips, the manager stared at the newspaper on the table impatiently, thinking to himself that he would have to walk around the whole hall in order to get all the herbs that Lin Li asked for. Remaining seated, he pressed his finger against the sheet of paper, rubbed it back and forth twice, and cocked his head sideways as he glanced at Lin Li in contempt. "You want these herbs? Do you know how much they cost? What do you think?" Lin Li asked with a frown as he thought to himself, "Why do you have so much nonsense to say? Hurry up, get me the herbs I want and scram. It's none of my business even if you die sleeping." "Hey, young man. You'd better be more pragmatic. You can't afford to be a pharmacist." The manager slid the piece of paper back to him and closed his eyes again in a bid to take a nap. Lin Li slammed his hand against the table and urged, "Could you hurry and get me my herbs?" Thud. The manager slammed his hand against the table too, and stood up to say, "You want these herbs, eh? Pay up first. Otherwise, I won't be able to sell the damaged herbs after they're exposed to the air if you go back on your word once I retrieve them for you. Do you know how strict pharmacists are with expensive herbs and ingredients? Do you think you can make potions just by pouring the herbs and ingredients all into one pot?" Lin Li found being questioned about his pharmaceutical knowledge absolutely ridiculous and absurd. However, he could not be bothered to argue with the manager either. He asked, "How much do they cost?" Fine, I'll calculate it for you." The manager stared at the paper on the table, and looked up at Lin Li before continuing, 20,000 gold coins. How much? 20,000 gold coins was nothing to Lin Li. Had the manager welcomed them warmly and politely when they entered, Lin Li would have been more than willing to give him a 20,000 gold coin tip after purchasing the herbs that were worth 2,000 gold coins. However, the manager actually had the audacity to charge him 20,000 gold coins for the herbs. He would be a fool if he were to pay. "You can't afford it, eh? Didn't I already tell you that you're too poor to be a pharmacist? Look at you people. So what if you're mages? Do you even know what pharmacy is about? Have you ever seen real potions before? You're just a bunch of country bumpkins, and yet you're thinking of becoming pharmacists. Do you even know how to use these herbs? Are you going to cook them into porridge?" the manager sneered. Upon hearing his words, Lin Li's frown vanished, and his lips curled into a smirk. Actually, it was not that infuriating to be mocked by an ignorant person who was blowing his trumpet ridiculously. In fact, it was absurd and hilarious. Don't be silly, concocting potions is meant for pharmacists to do. You country bumpkins should just go back where you came from. You can't even fork out 20,000 gold coins, yet you're thinking of becoming pharmacists. Pisht, the manager rebuked. Wilkinson couldn't take it at this point of time anymore. Master Felix was a master of pharmacy who was more knowledgeable than Teacher Balba. He should be respected by everyone. How could he be insulted by such a horrendous person? Boiling with fury, He felt an urge to reveal his identity and berate the manager who didn't know any better. He wanted to let him know that mages were not to be insulted. Shameless, the manager barked angrily after seeing that Lin Li still had the cheek to smirk. He ripped the piece of paper into shreds, crushed them, and got ready to throw them at Lin Li. However, at this very moment, a sharp and icy cold dagger was placed against his throat before he could even open his palm. Although the dagger was only placed against the skin of his throat, its chilliness seemed to have penetrated his skin. He wanted to swallow his spit, but had no choice except to stop for fear that the movement of his Adam's apple would cause his skin to be slit by the dagger. He had no idea when he released his hand, but all of the broken bits of paper had already been cast all over the ground, appearing extremely obvious against the clean and bright marble flooring. How dare these barbaric bumpkins treat me like this? The manager could hardly believe the reality. Although he was not a remarkable person in the city of Roland, no one dared to underestimate the seven-leaf grass medicinal store. Even a reckless warrior and an arrogant mage would have to address him politely as Mr. Manager. You people. Despite trembling uncontrollably, the manager still tried to suppress his fear, and yelled in a shrilling voice, "What are you people trying to do? Don't forget where this is. My boss is acquainted with Castellan Arthur. If you dare lay a finger on me, you can forget about leaving Roland City." The manager did not have any skills in magic or martial arts, and was actually terrified beyond words at this point now that he had a dagger placed on his throat. In fact, his legs became weak, and he couldn't stand straight anymore. If Lin Li had been dressed impeccably, he would have thought that he was a powerful and prestigious archmage, and knelt down before him to beg for mercy. Even if he hadn't, he would have spoken to him in a mellower tone, and things wouldn't have come to this. However, he felt that the four of them were definitely not mages that were supported by a powerful force. The manager was very confident in his judgment, and although he dared not move, he could not hide the panic in his eyes, and his mouth kept clamoring for a moment. "Open your eyes and see clearly. This is not your country. Seven-leaf grass is not a place for you to cause a stir or make trouble. You'd better consider the consequences of your actions. Don't mess with people you shouldn't be provoking. Let me tell you, I am a person who serves noble pharmacists and lords. So what if you're mages? You're just fooling those ignorant villagers. We're not short of mages here. They're just bumpkins who haven't seen the world. Once I show them my prowess and assert my dominance, they'll definitely be terrified and apologize immediately." However, the manager's judgment was obviously not as good as he had imagined, because he had no idea that the person holding him down was actually a vampire. Vampires would never hesitate to kill, just like how humans would never hesitate to kill chickens. Although Lin Li, Norfeller's master, was a human being, and he'd not easily kill because of some trivial matter, once he decided on a target, he'd never hesitate to kill him. Norfeller, who was closely associated to his master through the blood oath, would obviously be influenced by it and follow the example set by his master. Once Norfeller increased the force applied on the dagger, he would be able to slit the throat of whoever dared to offend his master. When that happened, even a pharmacist would not be able to save the other party. The manager's throat had already begun bleeding. At this moment, someone at the stairwell raised his voice as he made his way down. "Larry, what are you doing? Why is there such a ruckus? Don't you know that I'm discussing an important deal with some guests upstairs?" barked the owner of Seven-Leaf Grass, who was a handsome middle-aged man in his 50s. He'd initially been talking upstairs with the guests, and when it was time to talk about the important things, there was a ton of noise coming from downstairs, which made him feel embarrassed. Everyone in Roland City knew how prestigious Seven-Leaf Grass was, and even the Castellan would have to speak to him politely. "Who's the person who has the audacity to cause a stir at my place?" he thought. As soon as he stepped out of the stairwell, he was greeted with a clear sight of the commotion. The owner's face grew sullen when he saw the manager of his store being held down with a dagger placed against his throat. He'd initially thought that it was just a verbal argument, and blamed the manager Larry for not handling the matter appropriately. However, it seemed that Larry was being bullied. When the skin of his throat was cut, the manager knew that he had encountered a ruthless person who wouldn't care about his status or background, and would simply kill without hesitation or consideration of the consequences. At this point, the manager had already begun regretting what he'd said, and was on the verge of begging for mercy. At this moment, the boss of Seven Leaf Grass made his way downstairs while Lin Li hollered for Norfeller to stop. When the manager saw this scene, he knew that the dismal magicians were definitely daunted, and rejoiced over the fact that he had not begged for mercy. Since they dared not do anything to him, there was nothing for him to be afraid of. The thought of it made him feel energized, and he began complaining to his boss while ignoring the wound on his neck. "Boss, it's not that I defied you, but these foreigners are just too tyrannical. Look at my neck, it's bleeding because they cut me. I was kind enough to reason with them, but they don't take Seven Leaf Grass seriously at all. They whipped out their daggers and threatened to kill me." The manager struggled to break free while yelling, "Let go of me, let go of me." He knew that they wouldn't kill him anyway. "Dear guests, I don't know how my manager offended you, but we can talk things out nicely. There's no need to kill. Could you let go of him first? Tell me, what rude and offensive things has he done to make you so angry?" The owner was a businessman, and naturally had a good temper since he could manage Seven Leaf Grass so well. However, he definitely had a sullen expression now since his subordinate had gotten bullied. Lin Li knew clearly what the owner meant, but he was too lazy to argue with him. He smiled and instructed Norfeller to let go of the manager. The owner humped coldly, and chided the manager, "What are you waiting for? Hurry and come here to tell us what happened. How did you offend these customers?" The manager scurried towards the owner while holding his neck with one hand as it bled. He miserably said, "Boss, you can't blame me. They came in to buy some things, but when it was time to pay up, they complained that the prices were too expensive. He even accused us of being swindlers." Staring at Lin Li and the rest, the owner turned and chided the manager, "Didn't you tell them that we only supply herbs to pharmacists?" Upon hearing his boss's words, the manager was certain that he would definitely be blamed if the owner were to ask for the exact quote that he had given Lin Li. However, if he were to mention that the herbs were to be supplied to pharmacists, the problem would then lie with pharmacists. He reckoned that they definitely wouldn't be able to get a pharmacist to come here and confront them. The manager quickly added, "I saw that they were foreigners, and kindly reminded them that the herbs here are only to be used by the pharmacists. However, not only did they not listen, they even threatened me unreasonably. Look at my neck. Had you been a minute later, I would probably never have seen you again." He then moved his hand away and revealed his bleeding wound. Seven Leaf Grass had been operating in Roland for numerous years, and various professional guilds, mercenary squads large and small, and aristocratic families, be it upstarts or those which had a long history of more than 1,000 years, all had to show him some respect. The owner's face became more and more gloomy as he stared at the wound on the manager's neck. Although the wound was not serious, Lin Li and his company's behavior was equivalent to giving the boss an insult. However, the owner was a self-proclaimed person of status who wouldn't yell and scold them like the manager did. Glancing at the four shabbily dressed mages, the boss turned his head and reprimanded the manager. "How many times have I told you, even though most of our guests are noble pharmacists, we will inevitably come into contact with people from all walks of life. If you insist on serving only aristocrats, you will definitely cause a misunderstanding sooner or later." Yes, boss. "It was negligence on my part," the manager hurriedly chimed in. Actually, the bleeding had already stopped long ago, and he was only keeping his hand on his neck for the sake of gaining sympathy. "Enough. Just take this as a lesson to remember. If you make such a mistake again, I'll chase you out of Seven Leaf Grass," the owner barked sternly. Even a fool could tell what the manager and owner were driving at. Wilkinson was simmering with anger that was threatening to explode. Damn it, how dared he allude to nobility when he was yelling like a barbarian just now? What aristocrat spoke in such an uncouth manner? Wilkinson felt a strong urge to lose his temper and reveal his pharmacist identity. However, he dared not do so after staring at Lin Li, who was remaining composed. Yeah, we're senior pharmacists. Why should we stoop to the level of these merchants? Even if we reveal our identities, so what? All we would get is an apology and end up seeming like petty people, he thought. After reprimanding his subordinate, the owner turned his face to the side and said to Lin Li and the others, "Dear mages, I'm really sorry. We run a herbal medicine business here, and we usually interact with pharmacists more frequently as compared to mages. It may be that the manager Larry didn't explain things to you clearly, and thus caused a misunderstanding, resulting in you guys feeling offended by him. But now that I have punished him, can you hear me out calmly?" Although the owner of 7-leaf grass sounded kind and polite, everyone could understand the true meaning behind those words. He was just trying to say, "We are here to serve the noble pharmacists. You mages are no big deal to us here in 7-leaf grass. You didn't earn any respect, because you don't know your place at all." "Yes, boss. This is indeed my fault. I just didn't want them to waste their money. After all, 20,000 gold coins are all of their savings. However, I forgot to consider their pride. I deserve to be misunderstood as offending them." The manager played along, pretending to be reflecting on his mistakes sincerely. "Dear magicians, you have heard it. My manager has only done that out of goodwill. After all, these herbs can't be used by just anyone. We can do without these 20,000 gold coins, but we'll feel bad for letting our customers spend their life savings on some herbs that they can't use. So, I'd like to ask you to kindly forgive me if we have offended you in any way." However, the owner was holding his head high and chin up in a condescending manner as if Lin Li and the rest ought to thank him. Staring at the owner and the manager, Lin Li did not at all feel angry, despite their arrogant and contemptuous attitude. The battles that he had fought after reaching the legendary realm ever since he had arrived in the breezy plains had not only given him a boost in strength, they had also helped him build his character and true composure. Should this have happened in the past, Lin Li would have definitely thrown a tantrum and taught the people who had disrespected him a huge lesson. He wouldn't try to kill them, however. Yet, Lin Li only smiled calmly and got ready to leave with Wilkinson and the rest despite having been mocked by others. The owner and the manager were both insignificant to Lin Li, who would remain composed even if he were faced with an opponent in the legendary realm. How could he let a small fry affect his mood? At this moment, a figure scrambled from the stairs to the main hall. Lin Li stared at the person who was making his way down the stairs. It was none other than Sienna, the leader of the mercenary corps that had cooperated with Lin Li in rescuing the son of the castellan of Roland City. At the time, Senna had just been the leader of a useless mercenary group that was comprised of 30 to 40 incompetent mercenaries. However, he had actually dared to take on the task of rescuing the castellan's son from the sire bandits, and even took the castellan's daughter together with them. It had definitely been a stereotypical case of risking one's life for the sake of money. In the end, they had encountered a horrifying level 17 magical beast before they even reached their destination. Had they not been fortunate enough to run into Lin Li, the group would have been devoured by the magical beast. It was later proven that meeting Lin Li was the luckiest thing that had ever happened to Sienna. Compared to the experience he had in the ruins of Sire Town, the ice howler was just like an appetizer. When he battled the hordes of vampires and the lich, Sienna and his incompetent corps seemed to have become complete bystanders. Sienna, who had rushed down the stairs so hastily he tripped, stood on the floor with surprise and bewilderment written all over his face. He had never thought that he would actually see that young mage who had given him an unforgettable memory again in such a place after almost a year of separation. The owner, who was about to send Lin Li and the others away from 7-leaf grass, was dumbfounded after seeing how shocked and flustered Sienna was. For a moment, he couldn't figure out what happened, for Sienna was behaving very differently than before. Back then, Senna and Lin Li had escorted the pair of castellan's children safely back home. Lin Li's goal at the time had just been to acquire a giant supply of food from Roland City, so he'd let Sienna take the credit for saving the children without hesitation. He had even kindly put forward a suggestion which gave Sienna the idea how to maximize the opportunity to ask for reward, and propelled him to his current position in Roland City. When he had learned that he could send the pair of children back to the Castellan as a mercenary, Sienna had thought about using this credit in exchange for massive wealth and greater authority. However, Lin Li suggested him to use the credit in exchange for the support of Arather. If he weren't strong enough, wealth and authority would end up becoming a disaster that would inevitably destroy him. Here in the breezy plains, it was a survival of the fittest. Even the father of Arather, the esteemed and formidable previous Castellan of Roland City, ended up dying in his own home for a mysterious reason. Not to mention, Sienna was just an insignificant mercenary commander. The reality then proved Lin Li's suggestion to be apt and accurate. The priority of various official commissions was just one of many preferential conditions, and being allowed to recruit retired soldiers from Roland City was an important reason for the rapid development of the mercenary corps. However, it wouldn't be deemed a privilege elsewhere. The quality of the soldiers in Roland City that was led by Arather was second to none in the entire breezy plains. A mercenary regiment's high-end combat capability was not the only deciding factor in measuring its strength and capabilities. Its basic combat capability was crucial too. That was also the difference between mercenaries and adventurers. After all, a mercenary regiment didn't often take on unusually dangerous tasks, unlike adventurers. Although bloodshed was inevitable for mercenary corps too, they valued their lives far more than adventurers did. The recruitment of retired soldiers would greatly improve the quality of the mercenary regiment. Although the mercenaries might not be outstanding individually, they would form a force that should not be underestimated when hundreds or thousands of them stood together. Sienna felt thankful that he had made an intelligent decision, which allowed him to gain the recognition and approval of the Castellan, Arather. Later on, he was granted privileges that were far beyond what he deserved and had been promised initially. Sienna was now no longer the head of the useless team of 30 to 40 incompetent mercenaries. With the various privileges provided by the Castellan, his team had grown tremendously within less than a year, and had also expanded into the largest mercenary regiment in Roland City, comprising thousands of mercenaries. Apart from a few retired soldiers who were skilled and competent, the rest who had never been in the military before was put through vigorous training by Sienna. Of course, excellent combat skills were necessary for mercenary corps. It was said that Sienna had already recruited a man at level 18 to work for him. Given Sienna's current abilities, the news should be reliable. With Sienna's current abilities, he definitely had the means to monopolize all of the mercenary business given by the top factions. Regardless of the fact that Roland City was known for being one of the most developed cities in the breezy plains, the other mercenary regiments could only run errands and struggle as each day passed. For example, this time, the owner of 7-leaf grass was interested in sending over a batch of rare and precious medicinal herbs from the north. Hence, he had no choice but to spend a huge amount of money on hiring Sienna's mercenary corps to protect it. On top of spending a huge sum of money, he also had to try and persuade Sienna to take on his offer and do him the favor. This time, Sienna was in 7-leaf grass to sign the contract with the owner. His mercenary corps would be providing protection services too. To his surprise, something like that happened. Sienna's unusual behavior made the owner of 7-leaf grass feel rather bewildered. However, after being slightly stunned, he soon recovered from the shock, and realized that he still had some things to settle. He thought, how atrocious. Do they not know how difficult it is to get Sienna to agree to providing some help? How dare they cause a ruckus at such a crucial moment? Seeing that Sienna had already made his way downstairs, because of the commotion, the owner of 7-leaf grass grew even more annoyed and resentful towards Lin Li and company. At this point, it no longer just concerned his pride. If Sienna were upset, where was he supposed to find such a powerful mercenary regiment to take on the mission? Why are you people still here? Did you not hear what I said earlier on? You people have hurt and injured the manager of my store, but I just took that as a misunderstanding and I chose not to hold it against you. However, you'd better not take my compromise to be a sign of weakness. Don't think that I'm a pushover. If you continue to pester me because of this, I can clearly tell you that you'll be in trouble, the owner hollered impatiently with a frown. Damn it, there's really going to be trouble," Sienna exclaimed as soon as he recovered from his shock. However, he was dumbfounded again after hearing the harsh words that the owner said to Lin Li. Actually, Sienna followed the owner all the way to the stairs and looked down curiously in a bid to see who the person who had caused a stir at 7-leaf grass was. However, he got a great shock which made him almost scream in horror. He had never once expected to see the young mage who had given him everything that he had today. Sienna was extremely grateful to Lin Li, who had allowed him to claim credit for rescuing the children of Roland City's castellan, because everything that he owned was given to him by Lin Li that way. However, he felt a sudden sense of fear deep down, which he could not overcome. The experience that he had in Sire Town was so horrifying that Sienna could not forget it at all. Mage Felic's shrewdness sent chills down his spine too. When Senna was hesitating to come out to meet Lin Li, he heard the owner and manager of 7-leaf grass mocking Felic and the rest. It frightened him and immediately made his legs turn into jelly, causing him to roll down the stairs. The incident that took place in the ruins of Sire Town back then was deeply etched in his mind. The mysterious fear within him seemed to have overwhelmed him when the young mage appeared. However, what made Sienna feel hopeless were the harsh words that the darned owner said to Lin Li just as he was thinking about how he should explain himself to Felic. He thought, "You really don't know what it's like to court death, do you? No one is more ruthless than Mage Felic." The owner was just about to call out to Sienna, only to see the latter standing beside the manager, Larry. Feeling much more confident after seeing Sienna, the manager stared at the four of them smugly, and said, "I'm telling you people, this is the reputable." Unfortunately, he heard the sound of someone swallowing their spit before he could even finish speaking. The manager, who was rattling on and on, was then greeted with a bizarre sight. Sienna, the leader of the strongest mercenary regiment in Roland City and the castellan's most trusted confidant, was swallowing his spit nervously while stuttering, "Faye. Mage Felic, I'm actually not that close to them." "Leader Sienna, you." "What do you mean?" the manager asked as his face stiffened. The sudden change made the owner freeze in shock as he wondered, how did Leader Sienna's attitude change so quickly and suddenly? At this moment, Sienna suddenly turned to look at the owner, and barked, "Charles, I think you're in hot soup this time. Had I not hesitated, and come downstairs earlier, things wouldn't have come to this. But the thing is, isn't he afraid at all? This scoundrel Charles is indeed such a jinx. Whoever gets acquainted with him is bound to suffer from bad luck." Sienna's face turned pale, and he cursed Charles in his head continuously. "Damn, you're just the owner of a pathetic medicinal store. Can you afford to offend Mage Felic? He's a strong mage who had killed countless vampires and a humorous WYRM all by himself. Look, that lich is still so devoted and is following him around like an errand boy." Sienna glanced at Ujfalusi carefully, feeling daunted by the latter's gaunt figure, which he could never forget. "I'm finished. I'm really going to get implicated by that **shoal Charles this time," Sienna thought to himself, well aware of what Lin Li's temper was like. Back then in the ruins of Sire Town, Jason, who was Doolin's best adventurer, was a level 15 warrior just like two of his companions. In the end, President Felic managed to subdue him by placing a hand on his chest. The level 15 thief, Weather, had it much worse. He'd been electrocuted by that spell, resembling electric snakes. The thought of it made Sienna feel absolutely regretful as he thought to himself, "Why did I give in to temptation and stupidly sign the contract with this bastard just for the sake of 100,000 gold coins? If Mage Felic were to find out that I worked with him, what would he think of me? Should I just kill this idiot and secretly destroy the contract later?" After giving it some thought, Sienna decided to forego the idea, not because he was afraid that Charles might have a formidable supporter, but because he felt that Mage Felic would definitely find out the truth even if he were to kill Charles and Larry. "I just hope that Mage Felic will be able to discern right from wrong, and not let his anger make him turn against me, the innocent party. That bastard Charles's life has nothing to do with me. The contract that we signed is only limited to escorting his business vehicles anyway." Sienna could not help but pray for himself. Standing in front of Lin Li in fear, he respectfully exclaimed, "Mage Felix, I didn't expect to see you here. It's such a great honor." The store's owner had witnessed every detail of Sienna's behavior, and finally understood what was going on. Charles's heart wrenched up. Although Sienna had only become famous in the recent year, he had already become a reputable figure in Roland City. Everyone knew how much the Castellan valued him. In fact, he seemed to treat Sienna like a member of his family. Sienna's competency and ability were not to be doubted either. Within less than a year, his mercenary regiment had developed into a massive unit with thousands trained by soldiers and level 18 warriors. To Charles, they were almost a legendary formation. More importantly, Charles heard that even William, who owned the time consignment store, had forged some ties with Senna. William was not a simple person, and had connections to powerful figures all over the world. In other words, only a powerful and prestigious person would have the chance to be acquainted with William. Comment. Although he always expressed his disdain when comparing the time consignment store with his seven-leaf grass, Charles also had to admit that the seven-leaf grass was actually inferior to the time consignment store in every aspect. The time consignment store was not just a small business. Hence, even Arthur treated William respectfully, and not just courteously. They were actually worlds apart. The reputable and respected Sienna, who had a high status, had to act politely in front of Lin Li, just like a slave who was facing his master, who could decide whether he lived or not. Even the Castellan, Arthur, wouldn't get to enjoy such respect from Sienna. The thought of it made Charles feel more and more astonished and bewildered. He secretly wondered if he had gotten into trouble. Charles began to grow increasingly terrified. It took him a long and hard time to build the seven-leaf grass and develop it the way it was now. If he were to end up destroying the seven-leaf grass by offending a big shot, he would be devastated. Thank you for watching Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share and subscribe. Have a great day.